Hello everyone, this is Srikanti and today we are going to explore the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but with the modern adapted lens. Now you may already be familiar with the original model which organizes human needs into five levels, starting from the basic survival needs like food and safety and progressing all the way to self-actualization, where a person fulfills their true potential. Now, this adapted version acknowledges those original ideas but expands them slightly. Now, it helps us better understand how personal growth, emotional well being, and purpose are interconnected not just by linear steps. Now, in today's world, for example, emotional security, mental health, and identity expression plays a much bigger role than when Maslow first introduced his theory. So, throughout this section, we will look at how each level builds on the other, why some people get stuck at certain stages, and how psychological needs can affect motivation, relationships, and resilience. Now, think of this as a roadmap, like I mentioned in previous videos, not just for survival, but for personal fulfillment. Now, in this slide, we are introduced to the adapted hierarchy of needs model. Now, this version builds on the Maslow's original concept, but adapts it to reflect the psychological and emotional complexities we recognize today. Traditionally, Maslow outlined five levels, which is this model. So I'll show that in the next slide. But basically, the five levels are physiological, safety, love, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. But in this modern version, we emphasize that these needs aren't always strictly sequential. For instance, someone might pursue purpose or identity even if their safety needs aren't fully met. Now, the adaptive model also pays closer attention to mental health, emotional intelligence, and social dynamics, recognizing that factors like self-worth, autonomy, and meaningful connection plays a major roles in how we grow and function. So, as we go through each level, try to consider how these needs show up in your own life, not just in theory but also in practice. So, this is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So, like I have talked about in the previous slide, physiological safety, social, which is love, self-esteem, and self-actualization. But for right now, we will explore the first four foundational levels of the adapted hierarchy of needs. Now, these are essential for both survival and psychological balance. First, we begin with the biological and psychological needs. Now, these are our most basic requirements, things like food, water, sleep, and shelter. Now, without these, a body and mind cannot function properly. Now, they form the very base of the pyramid and must be met first. Next, we have safety and security needs. Now, once our biological needs are met, we naturally seek stability and protection. Now, this includes physical safety, but also like financial security, health, and also having the reliable routines. Now, it's about knowing the world is predictable and that we are protected from harm. Now, the third level focuses on belongingness and love needs. Now, this is where the social connection becomes vital. As human beings, we are wired for connection, whether it's family, friendships, or even romantic relationships. Now, when we feel included and cared for, we are able to thrive emotionally. Lastly, and then comes to the fourth level, esteem needs. Though it's not listed here, it typically follows the original hierarchy. However, depending on your adapted model, it must be merged or restructured, which we will explore more in the next slide. Now, these four slides illustrate how these four levels illustrate how our needs build upon one another, starting with more survival and moving towards more complex psychological fulfillment. Now, in this section, we are focusing on the external needs, the tangible, observable aspects of our lives that often shape our well being. Now, let us start with job promotions. Now, career, career growth isn't just about income, It's about recognition, stability, and a sense of purpose. Now, when people strive for promotions, they are often seeking validation and long-term security, um, both key psych- uh, both key psychological motivators. Next, we look at the family and the relationship support. Emotional backing from loved ones provides a crucial buffer against stress and uncertainty. Now, external support strengthens our confidence and helps us feel seen and valued in the world. Lastly, achieving the personal safety and security is foundational. Now, this includes the physical safety, like a safe home environment, but also financial and emotional security. Now, without this stability, it becomes much harder to pursue higher levels, higher level goals or personal growth. Now, all these external needs contribute to a secure base, which is essential for moving towards more internal, reflective goals. That is something we will explore in the upcoming slides. Now, let us take a moment to connect theory to practice by looking at some of the real life examples of external needs. Now, these are the needs that are influenced by or dependent on the outside world. Now, one great example is seeking a job promotion, which even though spoke about it in the previous slide, this will show how it connects to the external needs. Now, on the surface, this might look like one of the great example is seeking a job promotion. So, on the surface, this might look like a career move, but psychologically, it serves the multiple functions. Basically, it addresses the safety needs for providing greater financial stability and job security. It also meets esteem needs, offering recognition, status, and a sense of accomplishment. Now, another example could be also moving into a safer neighborhood. Now, this clearly relates to the need for physical safety and environmental predictability. Now, these are both essential for reducing stress and supporting long-term well-being. And consider seeking validation or support from a loved one. Now, this fulfills our belongingness and love needs, giving us emotional security and a sense of connectedness. Now, these examples show that the external needs aren't superficial, they're deeply connected to our mental and emotional functioning. Meeting these needs often give us the psychological stability to then pursue deeper, more internal growth. Now, we are shifting to a philosophical and a spiritual perspective, specifically to the Muslim school of thought to understand the concept of self-deficiency. Now, I'm not trying to attack one religion, but this is just an example of how it relates to the self-deficiency. Now, in Islamic psychology and theology, human beings are often viewed as created with an inherent deficiency, not in a negative or in a shameful sense, like I said before, but in a way that emphasizes their dependence on God, which is Allah in Islamic religion, for the wholeness and guidance. Now, this concept is closely tied to the idea of fitra, which is the innate human nature that inclines towards truth and goodness, but is also vulnerable to forgetfulness, temptation, and ego. Now, from this perspective, self-deficiency is a reminder that we are not complete on our own. It acknowledges that human limitations. It can be either emotional, physical, intellectual. Now, they are all part of our design, and that fulfillment comes not just from the self-improvement, but also from spiritual alignment and humility. Now, in psychology, we often talk about self-actualization as the highest level of human growth. Sorry, but in the Muslim school of thought, the self-actualization is intertwined with spiritual consciousness or taqwa. Now, this means that growth isn't only about mastering the self, but about recognizing the self limitations and turning towards divine guidance for meaning and balance. Now, this approach reframes deficiency not as a weakness, but as an invitation to connect with God, with others, or with our deeper purpose. Now, we will explore how this integrates with the broader psychological models and how this sense of humility and Spiritual grounding contributes to emotional resilience, self awareness, and inner peace. Now, in this slide, we are taking a closer look at the concept of self deficiency, a feeling that many of us experience but often struggle to define. Now, at its core, self deficiency refers to a perception of inadequacy. Now, that means the sense of the sense that we are not good enough or are not worthy or somehow lacking in comparison to others. Now, this perception can develop from past experiences, societal expectations, or internalized criticism. Now, it's a common psychological struggle and it can impact self esteem, relationships, and also mental health. Now, this feeling often drives a need for external validation. Now, when we don't believe we're enough on our own, we look to others to tell us we are, to tell us we are whether it's through praise, approval, social media attention, or accomplishments. But the issue is that this kind of validation is temporary. So when it fades, that feeling of deficiency often returns. The goal then is to begin the journey of the self acceptance. Now, this means learning to see ourselves with compassion, recognizing both our strengths and our limitations without judgment. It involves shifting this focus from trying to prove our worth to understanding and embracing our inherent value. Now, true, true growth happens when we stop measuring ourselves by external standards and begin to build an inner sense of worth that doesn't depend on perfection, not compassion, comparison or performance. To make the idea of self-deficiency more relatable, let's explore how it might show up in the real life. Now, imagine a student who consistently performs well but feels invisible unless they achieve something exceptional. Now, despite the good grades or praise they constantly push, they constantly push themselves harder, not out of passion but from a deeper rooted feeling of inadequacy. Now they may fear that without constant achievement, they won't be seen or validated or valued. Now this is a classic example of self-deficiency driving the need for recognition. Now we see this in adults too. Someone might chase career promotions, awards, or social approval, believing that these accomplishments will finally make them feel enough. But often, even achieving those things, there's always a sense of inner emptiness. Now, this behavior stems from the belief that external success can fix an internal wound. But the reality is that no amount of outside recognition can truly fill the gap caused by the low self-worth. Now, understanding this pattern is so powerful because once we recognize it, we can begin to shift the focus inward. Rather than constantly trying to earn approval, we can work towards building a sense of self acceptance and wholeness, regardless of how others respond. Now, this slide explores the relationship between the efficiency and validation and how both influence the way we pursue and fulfill our needs, particularly the external ones. Now, let us start with efficiency. In the previous slide, we talked about deficiency. Now we are talking about efficiency. So, in the context of personal development, efficiency means using our time, energy, and resources wisely to achieve the goals. It helps us meet our external needs like academic success, career progress, or relationship stability more effectively. Now, the more efficient we are, the more likely we are to feel capable, productive, and in control of our time. No, in control of our outcomes. However, there's another layer here: external validation. Now, while it's natural to want the recognition or and like approval, problems arise when our self worth becomes dependent on that validation. For example, someone might be highly efficient not to grow or serve a purpose, but to constantly prove themselves to others. Now, this pursuit of validation can become a cycle. Now, we work hard to earn praise. That praise boosts our self esteem, but only temporarily. Soon we need another achievement to feel good again. So while the efficiency can support the success, driven by the mere validation, it may lead to burnout, anxiety, or the loss of authenticity. Now the key is to become more aware of our motives. Are we striving to grow and fulfill meaningful goals, or are we trying to work? Are we working hard mainly to be accepted or admired? So, finding a balance between effective action and internal motivation is what leads to more sustainable well-being. So, let's close this section by looking at what true fulfillment looks like, not through external achievements but through self-growth. So, the path to fulfillment begins with understanding that the personal growth is a lifelong journey. It's not about reaching a final destination, but it's about consistently becoming more aligned with your values, purpose, and potential. First, we must em- First we must embrace challenges as opportunities. Rather than fearing failure or discomfort, we begin to see them as chances to stretch ourselves. Growth often begins where comfort ends. Secondly, cultivating the meaningful relationships is essential. Real fulfillment isn't a solo journey, it's supported by the deep authentic connections that allows us to be seen, heard and understood. Thirdly, we must focus on our personal values, not what society tells us what not what society tells us we should want, but what genuinely matters to us. So this clarity brings direction and purpose to our efforts. Lastly, practicing the self-reflection, and like always in the other videos that I mentioned, and mindfulness helps us stay grounded. Now, these practices gives us insight into our habits, emotions, and thought patterns, that allows us to grow with awareness rather than an autopilot. Finally, we must strive for continuous learning and improvement, whether it's emotional growth, new skills, or expanded perspectives. The most fulfilled people are the ones who never stop evolving. So ultimately, self growth isn't just about fixing what's wrong; it's about discovering what's possible. And then yeah, thank you for your attention, and I hope you guys like my video. Have a nice day. Bye.